Right, hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So this video is coming a bit late, my apologies for that, but it is the final video of 7.3 guide exploration series. So we're gonna start from left side to right side. I'm gonna go over every single path, and on the bright side I don't have to talk about Kang too much. I will overall suggest some of the better counters, but in general I have done full guide on Kang boss fight specifically already uploaded on channel, so we're not going to be talking about Kang too much in this video. Instead, we're going to be taking a look at the paths themselves. So on the left side we start with Acid Wash path, and we had exactly the same path design in like 4 different quests already in this chapter, where basically we have Acid Wash, so we deal hardly any damage unless opponent is under effect of poison, debuff, or passive. Every time we knock opponent down, they become debuff immune. And that means obviously that the poisons will fall off and you do no damage. So you don't typically want to knock the opponent down too much, even though there are a couple of matchups where you have to do that. Still, it is something that you ideally want to avoid. Toxicant enables any champion in the game to apply poison. Redouble Determination makes this entire thing a lot more tricky, because the more debuffs you have an opponent, the more power they're going to gain and the more attack they will have. And then we have Poison Vulnerability that can increase your damage. So I've seen this a lot, and you can use pretty much any champions here, to be honest. Aegon is a great pick because you can ramp him up and he will do well in the boss fight. He will also be good for that Nightcrawler finish there. Hercules is very good for this. OG Star-Lord. As I was re-exploring these paths, I actually found out that Emma Frost is a really good option, because with a 200% increased damage and the fact that she's going to be critting non-stop, if you don't use special attacks, you keep your power at 3 bars of power, you get 10 prowesses, which increases her crit rate significantly. She was doing really well. Colossus was doing well, but in general, I even brought in champions like The Thing and, I don't know, OG Thor. OG Thor was actually for Emma Frost at the end of the lane, and all of them worked out fine. You can quite literally use any champions, but ideally just make sure that you don't inflict too many debuffs on the opponent, and everything's going to be fine. They're going to have slightly increased combat power rate, but you're going to have increased damage. Against Emma Frost, you do want to use a special attack as soon as you get to it. You want to keep your power as low as possible to make sure she is out of diamond form as frequently as possible. Armor breaks are helpful, but again, too many of them will trigger a double determination. So you ideally want a champion that has access to a armor break as and when you need it, or just kind of slugs through it. I think I used Thing to finish the fight and something else. You will damage her. It's just going to be a bit slower fight, but it is probably the go-to path for most people because it's fairly straightforward, and it also doesn't have any links on Kang. Now the next lane is Incredible Cheese Fiesta. Just bring in Mr. Fantastic, bring in his She-Hulk synergy or Sentry synergy, and you're going to destroy this lane. Mr. Fantastic can solo everything on this lane, or pretty much any science champion with that synergy can do so. Also, damage over time effects on science champions here are kind of extremely potent, or damage over time effects in general, because this Hubris node is quite interesting in a sense that they take 90% less damage except during their special attacks, but after the special attacks end, they take a burst of 350% of damage that they took during the special attack. Damage over time effects keep on ticking during their special attacks, so they're going to take a burst of 350% damage of whatever your dot damage was during that time. But in general, ideally, you're meant to play here with Power Stings, so Spider-Ham is a great option. Again, Mr. Fantastic synergy is not too bad. Or, thanks to this top node, any science champion that has plenty of debuffs also works extremely well, because every time you parry, you inflict a Power Sting. The Power Sting duration is increased for each debuff that you have on the opponent, and, you know, you're going to be dealing damage that way. But yeah, just Mr. Fantastic or Spider-Ham's kind of all what you need there. In case you don't have those, then bring in science champs with a lot of debuffs and ideally damage over time effects, like Human Torch, for instance. Right, next up, Punisher 2099 lane. And the key here is that you ideally only want to bring in skill, science, and cosmic champions on this lane, because those are the only champions that have a chance to damage Kang. Because of the linked node, it's very important that for this lane number 3, you only bring in skill, science, and cosmic champions, because you will need that. And if you want to use any of those champions in Kang boss fight, you need to have at least 6 paradox charges ideally on them. The best case scenario is 8 paradox charges and access to some more fury buffs, because then you have significantly easier time. The path itself has safeguard on. That's the only kind of important thing. There is the entire paradox thing where you gain a paradox charge every 5 hits on your combo meter. You lose a paradox charge every time you intercept, so you will have to intercept quite a lot in this fight, but you have increased debuff potency, and as long as you use champions that have access to damage over time effects, you will be able to use that to quite effectively bypass safeguard, and be that bleed from skilled champions or be that some other damage over time effects. All that stuff is going to be helpful. You don't actually necessarily have to focus on the safeguard part, because these guys have like nearly 400k health anyways, and your damage cap is at like 4k per hit, which is fairly decent, you know. And what is the worst case scenario? You're gonna have 100 plus hit fight. Safeguard on health pools as large as this kind of loses its meaning, because many champions, you know, will hardly even feel it. So there is that. Just make sure that you bring in science, skill, or cosmic champions here. You can bring in Hercules, you can bring in Immortal Hulk. King Groot is a phenomenal option, and I don't know, Nick Fury, and so on and so forth. Right. Moving on to the next path, we have selective Timestream. And many people don't know this, but MCOC is actually incredibly cheesy option for this. If you do not believe me, type in YouTube search bar MCOC selective Timestream. I have showcased how he cheesed these fights. Or you just come in here, bring in MCOC, and time your level 1s with the, you know, timer of selective health stream. It doesn't have to connect, it just have to be activated there around that time, and you're gonna have quite a lot of fun. You can probably finish these fights in like 2 or 3 level 1s. Very interesting. Other than that, it's Incinerate and Shock vulnerability to complement selective Timestream, and it has Oscillate as well. So newly buffed Nebula will work great. In my initial run, I used Night Rusher. We have Black Widow Deadly Origins. You can also use Black Widow Clairvoyant, or whichever ones are your more preferred Shock and Incinerate champions, like Sentinel, so on and so forth. All of that stuff goes as long as you have access to frequent and stable access to Shock or Incinerate. You'll have quite good time. Human Torch and all the lot. This perhaps was my favorite lane in this entire quest, or one of the favorite lanes. We have the Gloves Are Off, which basically just gives fury buffs to tech champions whenever their armor ups expire or are armor broken. And in between the rest of the nodes and a lot of tech champions, you know, timed armor ups like Ultron, for instance, you can have a really fun time. I quite literally just brought in Ultron with the Hulkbuster synergy and tore through the entire lane. But you can use any champion. The way this is designed, it's fairly forgiving lane. You don't need to use tech champions. You can just ignore the nodes. There's nothing significant besides like Bubble Shield, which is, again, nothing that is significant. You can literally bring whichever champion you like playing the most. They will do fine. If you want to work with the nodes, have some benefit in form of those fury buffs and the rest of the stuff, then bring in tech champions that, you know, can gain armor ups, and that's about it. And the final node is kind of inverse of the node that we were talking about, where you had to use skill, science, or cosmic champions. In this one, you have to use mystic, mutant, or tech champions. And any champion that you plan to use against Kang boss, ideally you want to finish off with at least 6, ideally 8 paradox charges. If you do not bring in your mutant, your tech, your Mystic champions in this lane, you will have to redo it because you can do no damage to Kang. Very, very, very important. We have Paradox combo again, Entropic Prowess. The attacker gains 30% of their special attack rating. Each Paradox charge on the attacker whenever the defender is knocked down, remove 1 Paradox charge. So you need to keep using your heavy attacks here. Basically, you need to keep knocking down the opponent for every 5 hits that you do once you have built up some Paradox charges. Whenever the attacker strikes the defender, 1 buff on the attacker is nullified. This nullify effect is disabled if the attacker has 3 or more Paradox charges. So that's kind of the tricky bit. You need to make sure that you have 3 Paradox charges as early as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be taking the damage from Shatter, as each time the attacker has an effect nullified, they receive a burst of direct damage. And it does hurt. It does hurt. And they also have an indefinite protection, reducing all damage received by 75%. This goes on cooldown when they are knocked down. So again, you have to keep knocking them down. But other than that, you can kind of use pretty much everyone. If you want to benefit from this node, you can fairly easily bring in, I don't know, Namor and some other champions. You know, you can just reflect the damage. But as it stands, you just want to basically do not dex, do not activate the dexterity. You want to drop 3 heavy attacks, get 3 Paradox charges, and then make sure you never fall below 3, and you'll be fine. That's it. Not much more there. And the opponents, you know, Night Rusher, Odin, and Crossbones, they're not really the hardest ones. Then Champion, if you have Mystic Champion, which you should probably do, like Doom with you, not too bad. Then will Hell's Kitchen, Super Skull. Nothing too crazy there. Just very important to read the node in terms of Kang fight and understand that you have to bring in Tech, Mutant, or Mystic for this lane. When it goes to Kang fight, most of the champions are fairly well suited to do it. Kang fight overall, I think, is the easier fight in between Gwynmaster and Grandmaster and stuff like that. It is quite fun. It can become tricky. You know, it's very important to understand these nodes, like the Power Looper. When your Power Loop duration is decreased by 15%, it's quite annoying actually at times. All these charged up, you know, for most part, it's just the 2 that you have to be super aware, which is these paradox kinetic, neurokinetic paradox. Beauty and Prowess. If you want a Kang guide, then you can find that on my channel as well. And that will do here. I hope this video did help you. And yeah, this is the final one. So now we're going to have to wait for variant 8 guides, probably. I'll do those per chapter. All right, either way. Catch you guys soon. See ya.
Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about